If you look at a map of the Philippines, Mindanao sits at the bottom like a heavy anchor. It looks solid, massive, the second largest island in the archipelago. But if you strip away the rainforests, peel back the cities, and look at the bare bones of the earth, you see the terrifying truth. Mindanao isn't one island. It is a monster, a geological Frankenstein stitched together by violence. It wasn't formed peacefully in the ocean. It was smashed together in a tectonic car crash that has been happening for 20 million years. This isn't just land, it is a crime scene of continental proportions. Welcome to the land of unconquered Earth. To understand the wars that would drown this island in blood, you first have to understand the rock. In the deep past, these were two separate worlds. To the east, you had the East Mindanao Arc, a wild volcanic chain born of fire in the Pacific Ocean. To the west, the Zamboanga Peninsula, a refugee continent that broke off from the edge of China and drifted south. They were on a collision course. When they finally slammed into each other, the force was so catastrophic it didn't just merge them, it buckled the crust of the planet. It trapped a sea between them and crushed it into stone. This collision didn't just make land, it made a fortress. The scar from that collision is still visible today. Geologists call it the Agusan Davao Trough. It is a massive sediment-filled depression running right down the spine of the island. It is the suture zone, the glue holding the two halves of the monster together. This trough became a fertile basin, a breadbasket trap that would eventually lure conquerors from across the sea. But flanking this soft belly are walls of stone, the Diwata Mountains to the east and the Central Cordillera to the west. These mountains are the teeth of the trap. They created a landscape so rugged, so hostile to traditional armies that it would defy empires for 300 years. And the collision brought gifts. The volcanic heat from the East Mindanao Arc cooked the rocks, injecting veins of pure gold and copper into the cracks. The Masara Gold District, the Diwalwal Fields. Mindanao sits on trillions of dollars of mineral wealth. It is a land of terrifying abundance. But abundance brings envy, and envy brings war. For centuries, this wealth was protected not by armies, but by the sheer unnavigable hostility of the terrain. The jungle was the vault, and the mountains were the combination lock. The Spanish, the Americans, the Japanese, they all came for the key, but the land fought back. Long before the Spanish galleons broke the horizon, civilizations thrived here. The sultanates of Mindanao and Sulu were not loose tribes, they were sophisticated maritime states. They traded with China, with India, with the Dutch. They had diplomats, laws, and standing armies. And they had a religion, Islam, that gave them a unified identity and a connection to the wider world. They knew every river bend, every mountain pass, and every coral reef, and when the invaders finally came, they were ready to defend it. 1635. The Spanish Empire, obsessed with conquest and Christ, plants a stone stake in the heart of Zamboanga. They build Fort Pilar. They look at the map and see another island to add to their collection. They called the people Moros, a derogatory slur borrowed from their wars against the Moors in Africa. They think it will be easy. They think their steel Toledo swords and heavy gunpowder will crush the bamboo and belief of the natives. They were wrong. They were about to step into a 333-year meat grinder that would drain the Spanish treasury and break their spirit. Enter Sultan Dipatuan Kudrat, the game changer. He wasn't just a warrior, he was a grand strategist who understood the geology of his home better than anyone. He understood that the Spanish strength was their cohesion, and the Moro weakness was their division. So he did the impossible. He united the feuding Datus of the Pulangi, the Iranoon of the coast, and the Maranao of the lake. He forged a federation of resistance. He knew he couldn't beat the Spanish in a straight line, so he used the land, he used the rivers, he turned the geography into a weapon. In 1639, the Spanish tried to negotiate. They offered peace in exchange for submission. Kudarat saw through the lie. He gathered the Maranao Datos and delivered a speech that burns through the pages of history. He asked them, "Do you realize what subjection would reduce you to? A toilsome slavery under the Spaniards. Turn your eyes to the subject nations and look at the misery to which such glorious nations have been reduced to. Allow yourselves to be subjects today, and tomorrow you will be at the oars." He wasn't speaking metaphorically. He meant the galleys. He meant death. Kudarat's war was built on the kota. These weren't European castles of brittle stone that shattered under cannon fire. These were masterpieces of indigenous engineering. Walls made of earth, bamboo, and palm trunks, feet thick. When a Spanish cannonball hit a kota, it didn't crack the wall, it just thudded into the dirt. The earth absorbed the kinetic energy. The land itself swallowed the Spanish fire. Inside these mud fortresses, the Moros bled the conquistadors dry, one siege at a time. It was the ultimate example of using the environment to neutralize superior technology. And they didn't just defend, they attacked. The Lenong and Garai warships were the apex predators of the Southeast Asian seas, fast, shallow draft, and heavily armed. They could strike Spanish settlements in Luzon and vanish into the mangroves before the heavy Spanish galleons could even turn around. This wasn't just piracy, it was asymmetric naval warfare. The Spanish called it terror, the Moros called it revenue. For 3 centuries, the Spanish Empire was held hostage by these wooden ghosts. Spain controlled the maps, but the Moros controlled the water. 1898, the Spanish Empire collapses. The Americans buy the Philippines for $20 million at the Treaty of Paris, but they bought a map, not the territory. They realized quickly that while they were fighting Aguinaldo's revolutionaries in Luzon, they couldn't afford a second war in the South. They needed a stall. They needed a lie. Enter Brigadier General John C. Bates. His mission was simple: keep the Moros quiet until the North is pacified. He didn't come with guns, he came with a piece of paper that would become infamous. August 1989, the Bates Treaty. To the Sultan of Sulu, Jamalul Kiram II, the treaty was a pledge of brotherhood. The Tausid translation explicitly used the word for protection and recognized the Sultan's rights, but the English version? It said sovereignty. The Sultan thought he was accepting an ally. The Americans knew he was signing a surrender. It was a translation trick that would cost thousands of lives, a deception written in ink before it was written in blood. The Sultan slept soundly, believing his throne was safe, while the U.S. Army sharpened its bayonets. The lie worked. The Moros stayed neutral while the U.S. crushed the Philippine Republic in the north. But by 1904, the Americans didn't need the Sultan anymore. They unilaterally abrogated, canceled the Bates Treaty. They declared the Sultanate abolished. The protection was over. The conquest had begun. And the Moros realized, too late, that the Americans were not different from the Spanish. They were just more efficient. The betrayed Datos retreated to their kotas, but this time they weren't facing muskets. They were facing the industrial might of the 20th century. But the Americans brought a weapon the Spanish never had. Not a gun, but a law. The Public Land Acts of 1903, 1913, and 1919. These laws declared all unregistered land as public domain. The Moros, who had no concept of paper titles, suddenly became squatters on their own ancestral land, and the system was rigged. A settler from the north could claim up to 24 hectares. A Moro was often restricted to just 4. It was legal demographic engineering, a slow-motion theft authorized by the state. They didn't just take the land, they legislated it away. The Moros responded with a ferocity that terrified the U.S. Army. This was the era of the juramentado, warriors who took a ritual oath, bound their bodies to prevent bleeding, and charged into death. The standard-issue U.S. .38 caliber revolvers were useless. The bullets passed right through the adrenaline-fueled warriors. The Moros kept coming. Officers wrote home in terror, describing men who refused to die. This wasn't war, it was a collision of spiritual will against lead, and for a moment, the spirit was winning. This terror drove the U.S. Army to the drawing board. They needed a man-stopper. They conducted gruesome tests on cattle and cadavers to find a bullet that could knock a juramentado onto his back. The result? The Colt 45 M1911. The legendary American sidearm was born not in the trenches of Europe, but from the fear of Mindanao. Every time you see a 45 in a movie, remember, it exists because a Moro warrior refused to fall. To enforce these laws, Washington sent its hardest men. General Leonard Wood, a man who believed the only good Moro was a dead Moro, and General John J. Pershing, Blackjack, who earned his fame hunting Moros in the jungles of Lanao before he ever set foot in World War I. They didn't want negotiation, they wanted submission. They launched search and destroy missions that burned villages and crops, turning the interior into a howling wilderness. They cornered the resistance, pushing them higher and higher into the mountains. March 1906, the tipping point. 1,000 Tausug villagers protesting the Cedula tax retreat to the crater of Bud Dajo. They brought their families, their livestock. They thought the mountain was a sanctuary. They thought the vertical walls would protect them. But General Wood didn't see a sanctuary. He saw a fishbowl. He surrounded the mountain and hauled artillery to the rim. He didn't order a siege. He ordered an extermination. The geometry of the volcano worked against them. There was nowhere to hide from guns firing down. For 4 days, they rained shells and machine gun fire into the trapped crowd. It wasn't a battle, it was a shooting gallery. When the smoke cleared, the floor of the crater was a lake of blood. Out of nearly 1,000 people, only 6 survived. 6! Mark Twain, reading the news in America, wrote in fury, "We cleaned up our 4 days' work and made it complete by butchering these helpless people." Bud Dajo wasn't a victory, it was a crime scene. And then they took a picture, the famous trench photo of Bud Dajo, soldiers posing above the dead like hunters with trophy game. This image was printed on postcards, sold in Manila, sent home to mothers in Ohio. It stands as the ultimate proof of the dehumanization of the Moro people. They weren't seen as humans defending their homes, they were seen as obstacles to be cleared for the plantation economy. It is an image that should haunt us. It happened again in 1913 at Budbagsak. This time, Pershing led the charge personally. Hundreds more died. It marked the end of the major armed resistance. The heavy artillery and the relentless campaigns had finally broken the back of the defense. The Frankenstein Island was finally shackled, but the victory was hollow. You can conquer the land, but you cannot conquer the memory of the land. The blood spilled at Bud Dajo and Budbagsak seeped into the soil, planting seeds that would grow for another century. The guns fell silent, but the displacement didn't stop. It accelerated. The Land of Promise campaign flooded Mindanao with settlers from Luzon and Visayas. The forests were cut, the plains were planted with pineapple and banana for multinational corporations. The demographic shift was catastrophic. In 1918, Moros were the majority in their own land. By 1970, they were a minority, less than 20%, strangers in the house their ancestors built. The geological fortress was finally breached, not by soldiers, but by settlers. This dispossession created a social volcano. The poverty, the landlessness, the memory of the massacres, it all boiled over in the 1970s, the Moro National Liberation Front. The conflict didn't spring from nowhere. It was the direct result of the Bates Treaty, the Public Land Acts, and the craters of Jolo. The violence of the 20th century was just the aftershock of the tectonic collision of the 17th. But the spirit of Kudarat didn't die in the crater of Bud Dajo. It survived in the culture, the faith, and the memory of the people. Today, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region stands as a testament to that survival, an attempt to heal the century-old wound, to acknowledge that this land, this collision of earth and fire, was never truly conquered. It was only occupied. Mindanao remains the rugged, beating heart of the archipelago. From the first stone of Fort Pilar to the final signature on the Public Land Acts, the timeline of Mindanao is a lesson in how a people can be erased by policy as effectively as by war. The Kota neutralized the cannon, the Lanong outran the gallium, the Uramentado defied the revolver. It was a technological arms race where the indigenous solutions often outsmarted the imperial ones. Two islands became one, a collision that created gold, trapped a sea, and built the walls of a fortress. The geology didn't just set the stage, it wrote the script. Based on historical records, geological surveys, and primary documents. Join us next time as we travel north to an island that is literally hollow, a land of invisible rivers, blind fish, and a church bell that signaled the massacre of an American company. Episode 3, Samar, the Karst Labyrinth.